So who are the best wonder kids coming through Gaelic football at the minute? In this video, we're going to be looking at every county and every county's up-and-coming prospect in Gaelic football. What young players are coming through the ranks at the minute in Gaelic football, from Antrim to Laois, from Laois to Cavan, from Cavan to Wicklow. Let's do this. Here we go.
Well, nowadays you've got to have it because people nowadays.
Before we get straight into the podcast, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Declan Kirby GAA Star. Declan Kirby GAA Star Championship Journey. It's a series of GAA team children's books written by primary school teacher and GAA coach Michael Egan. You can check it out in the link in the description down below, of course, as well. Follow the trials and tribulations of Declan Kirby and his team at Smithgreen Gaelic Football Club, recently formed but promising GAA team. The book is now available in Easons and all good bookshops, so check it out in the description down below, and let's get straight into it. Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron, and as I said in the intro there, we're going to be taking a look at every county in Gaelic football and discussing the young and up-and-coming prospects coming through every county in Gaelic football. We're going to be looking at all 31 counties in Ireland and what players they obviously have coming through at the minute. Obviously, we won't be discussing Kilkenny because they don't have a senior football team. We're going to be discussing London and New York as well, some potential players who could break through there as well. And I thought I'd do something a little bit different in today's video. We will be doing the regular show as always tomorrow, where we preview all the games, discuss all the games, break them down, give my predictions, all the rest. But look, listen, this is the People's Channel right here, and of course a couple of you lads were mentioning maybe to make a few more videos like this and whatnot, so I said, you know what, let's go and do exactly that. And I did do a video earlier in the year as well, looking at the top 10 players that could make a breakthrough in 2022. And that video done very well. So I said, you know what, let's make another one. This time looking at every county in Ireland and some players that are breaking through the ranks. Now, do bear in mind, of course, look, listen, you know, David Clifford, Rian O'Neill, Jimmy Hyland, all young up-and-coming players that have broke through their counties this year, that have made a huge impact, that are certainly very well known. So, you know, I'm trying to think a little bit outside the box here as well. I'm not going to be going for the obvious examples. You know, for Mayo, for example, you could pick anyone from their starting 15 really at this point. But there are a few players coming through there as well that haven't made it into the starting 15 yet. And I think that's what makes it a little bit interesting. So we are going to try and pick out a couple of players as well that maybe some of you lads haven't heard of before, or maybe there hasn't been that much discussion over. So look, we'll go in alphabetical order, starting off with Antrim. And look, obviously with some of these counties, it's obviously very hard to know exactly who's coming through. And certainly I'll be looking for some help from you lads in the comments down below. And look, I reached out a bit to a few Antrim people just to see, you know, what players are really breaking through there at the minute, because their minors and under 20s aren't exactly going too well at the minute. Rory Brolly was a name that some people mentioned, and a name that I've heard a few people mention in the past. But is he an up and coming player, or is he, you know, he's Joe Brolly's son? Is that why he's in the mix? I don't know. I haven't seen him play, so honestly haven't got a clue right there. But the one player that was mentioned quite a bit was a player by the name of Ethan Kerry Small. So he was 2021 Young Antrim Footballer of the Year, and obviously played a huge role in Kickham's Cregan winning the Antrim Senior Football Championship last year. They won their first Antrim Senior Football Championship in 67 years. So he played a huge role for Kickham's Cregan in winning that title right there. So yeah, good up-and-coming player with Antrim at the minute. Certainly a player that a couple of people are talking about. Obviously, you know, you kind of need boots on the ground sometimes to see some of the younger footballers that are coming through some of the lesser-known counties, shall we say. But certainly this is a player that has been mentioned. Owen Gallagher is another name there as well, but he's obviously committed with Galway from what I believe as well. So Ethan Kerry Small of Antrim, definitely maybe a player to watch out for. The fact that he was, you know, the Young Antrim Footballer of the Year for 2021 tells you that he's certainly regarded very, very highly, and obviously played a huge role in Cregan's ending that 67-year wait for an Antrim Senior Football Championship. We then move on to Armagh. as you said, we're going to be going in alphabetical order. And I mean, there's a whole host of players here, isn't there? There's a whole host of options. As I said at the start there, Rian O'Neill, he counts as a wonder kid in many ways. He's only broke through in the last 3 or 4 years. You've got Conor Turbitt in there, Keane McConville as well, son of Usheen. He's obviously coming through the ranks there as well. But the player I've gone for here is Ross McQuillan. And look, he's definitely a player that's coming through the ranks at the minute for Armagh. He came back from AFL just a couple of years ago just at the end of 2020. He also, interesting enough, played for the same AFL team as Conor McKenna in Essendon. So, he's definitely a player for Armagh that's, worth watching out for. He's made a couple of appearances here and there coming off the bench. He came off the bench versus Dublin. So, look, he's definitely a player worth watching out for. Very good on his feet, quick, athletic, explosive on the ball. And, especially for Antrim, or for Armagh, should I say, when you look at some of the players that they do have coming off the bench and some of the talent that they do have, or some of the talent that they have in their starting 15 already, in Rian O'Neill, in Tiernan Kelly, Conor Turbitt, Jason Duffy. And now all of a sudden you've got a player like Ross McQuillan just going under the radar a little bit. Could be a serious star, and could be, a big difference for Armagh when they're competing for Ulster senior football titles, when they're going for the big honours. If they want to make that step up as well, they're going to need some players coming off the bench to make a bit of a difference. And certainly Ross McQuillan could be that man. Moving on to Carlow. Yeah, like with a lot of these lower counties, quite tough to find someone, and it can be a bit of a struggle. But there is a player in the name of Conor Crowley who has been mentioned before, and he could be one to watch out for Carlow this year. So he started all 4 games for Carlow this year, scoring 1-3 from play, including 1-1 versus Waterford in the most recent game. And, Carlow have obviously had a huge turnover of players in the last couple of years. You've obviously got Paul Prodrick, who's retired, no Daniel St. Ledger in there either. Change in management, change in backroom team, change in style. They've shifted really from quite a defensive side under Turlock O'Brien, playing that blanket defence and trying to hit teams on the counter-attack, from a very open and expansive style with John Carew, which John Carew, he was the guy who used to play for Aston Villa, wasn't it? It's not John Carew, it's Paul Carew, I think it is. Yeah, but Conor Crowley is the man we're speaking about right there. And as I said before, with Carlow, it'd be great to get some, great to see these teams a bit more, great to see what they're made of. But looking at statistics so far this year, that is very impressive stuff from a Carlow point of view. And let's bear in mind as well, Carlow have struggled so far this year as well. Just 1 win in there. I think they have the worst score difference as well. Absolutely trashed in that game by Sligo. So it's been a tough one for Carlow. Andrew Keogh and Cormac Lomax are 2 other players who've been making a bit of a breakthrough there. 2 other players who've been breaking through at the minute. But as we were saying before, I do think the talent definitely of Conor Crowley is definitely one worth watching out for. Richard Daly says, is the Dubs going to kickstart their season this weekend against current All-Ireland champions Tyrone? I'd rather see Tyrone and Monaghan get relegated, and of course Armagh to stay up, beat Kildare, stay up. Yeah, we'll be discussing all that tomorrow, my man. We'll be discussing all the games tomorrow, all the action, all the big talking points. So stay tuned for that. And I'll definitely break that down in further detail. But as I said, title of this video, we're going to be looking at the best wonder kids coming through every county at the minute in Gaelic football. And I suppose that moves us on to Cavan. And, with Cavan so far this year, or really in the past couple of seasons, really, you would be looking at them and seeing, who's coming through there. They've been lacking a real quality forward maybe in the last couple of years. But in someone in Paddy Lynch, he looks like a player who might just maybe be that guy. I mean, Sean McAvoy, he looked like a serious talent coming through the Cavan under-20s and looked very good for Rammer United as well. But, he's obviously gone off playing soccer from what I believe. So Paddy Lynch is a forward they've obviously turned to. He scored 1-9 in 4 games so far this year, making him Cavan's top scorer so far in 2022. And in the Cavan Senior Football Championship in 2020 as well, he was their top scorer, or he was Crosser Lock's top scorer, scoring 347. So that really tells you how good of a forward he is coming into that Cavan team. And if Cavan are going to do anything extraordinary or a little bit outside the box, maybe like they done in 2020, when of course they went all the way and won the Ulster Senior Football Championship, maybe he might be that perfect addition in there, that extra player coming in, and he could be one worth watching out for, most definitely from a Cavan point of view. And Cavan obviously have a very experienced team in there at the minute in Grode McKernan, Martin Riley, Raymond Gallagher, Thomas Gallagher. But Paddy Lynch definitely been a fantastic addition from a Cavan perspective. Moving on then to Clare, and we have a player by the name of Emmett McMahon. Now, Joe McGann has definitely been a player who's stood out a little bit for Clare in the last couple of years. He's made a couple of appearances off the bench, but I did throw out a post on Instagram earlier today up at GAA Fan TV on Instagram, if some of you lads and girls aren't following over there. And this was a name that was mentioned, so I said, I'll have a look into it. Let's see how good he is. And he's been quiet enough this year. He's made a couple of appearances coming off the bench, scored a point against Cork. But really the big performance was against Mayo last year in that playoff to get into Division 1. He scored 3 points coming off the bench, made a huge difference as Clare really pushed Mayo going down the home stretch. And definitely Emmett McMahon is a player worth watching out for from a Clare perspective. Looks very talented, looks the part, brilliant at kicking scores as well, from I remember in that Mayo game, supporting the players around him, whether it be Conor or Owen Cleary or David Tuberty. So, Clare have a lot of options there, and they've got a couple of players just going, coming under the radar. As I said, Joe McGann was another one coming through the radar there as well. Moving on to Cork, and look, Cork have, a whole host of options really coming through the ranks there at the minute. You could look at Cathal O'Mahony, Mark Cronin, who's looked all right at times this year. Conor Corbett looks very good at minor level, has looked good at under 20 level as well. But the player I've gone for in the end is Blake Murphy, and 1-5 so far this year in 2 starts this year in Division 2 of the Allianz National Football League. And, coming through the ranks of that great under 20 Cork football team that won the All-Ireland when they beat Dublin a couple of years ago, I think back in 2019, I think it was. So there have been a couple of players there kind of in the background. Are they going to make that step up? Are they going to make that breakthrough? And Blake Murphy looks as if he might be that guy, and he's been very impressive so far this year, scoring 1-5, as I said. Heard he was very impressive against Galway as well. From what I remember of seeing of him last year, in Division 2 was, very direct, great at opening up the space, and to score 1-5 in 2 starts as well really tells you the ability that man has. And as I was saying before, for Cork, they are in a bit of transition. They've had a couple of players who've opted out, retired, a lot of changes really in the panel, and they are going to be looking at some of those under-20s to make that step up, whether it be a Mark Cronin, whether it be a Cathal O'Mahony, who is actually injured at the moment, to be fair, and he was actually looking really good last year before he picked up his injury in the league, I think it was. So, Blake Murphy coming in there, looking very good, as I said, 1-5 in 2 starts this year. Moving on to Derry, and look, Derry have a whole host of good players in their panel. Obviously, at the minute, a whole host of talented footballers making the breakthrough there at the minute. And what actually impresses me is that Lakeland Murray, who's come into the Derry side so far this year, and Matthew Downey, to be fair, both are actually part of the minor team that won the 2020 All-Ireland. It was actually played last year. It was actually a delayed final because of COVID. The final didn't actually get played until, I think it was played in May or something like that of last year, just a couple of months before Meath's All-Ireland minor victory there as well. So Lakeland Murray's gone straight into the senior football team, which says a lot really about his quality. There aren't too many footballers who go straight from minor level right up into the senior footballers, and skipping that under 20 grade. You think of David Clifford, he's an example who went straight from minors right up until up into the senior team. And when you think of how many good players Derry have, how many good forwards they have, the fact that he's gone straight in there and pretty much started every game, tells you a lot about how much Rory Gallagher must rate him as a player. He scored 4 points so far this year. He's actually scored a point in every game so far this year for the Derry senior footballers. And as I said, he was a key part of that team, that Derry minor football team that won their first minor football championship since 2002. That was in the delayed 2020 minor football final. He scored 1-2 that day as they beat Kerry in the final. So that really does tell you his ability. And as I said, the fact that he's gone straight into the senior team there as well, that's very interesting, isn't it? And it'd be interesting to keep an eye on him a little bit, maybe going into that Ulster Football Championship as well. Will he feature as much in the sort of big games for Derry? That'll be interesting. But looking very, very good, no doubt about it. As for Donegal, I mean, look, they have a good crop of young players that have come through in the last couple of seasons. You obviously have Quayla McGonigal who's come in there, Conor O'Donnell and Shane O'Donnell looked very good last week. But a player that maybe might be a bit of an obvious choice maybe for Donegal, maybe this one a lot of people have already heard of, but it is the name of Oisín Gallen. And I think he's been very impressive for Donegal. He's struggled a little bit with injuries, hasn't really been a frequent starter, hasn't really cracked the starting 15 position yet for Donegal. But this guy is extremely talented. I mean, I remember watching him, I think it was against Armagh a couple of years ago in the 2020 Ulster quarter-final, and he was absolutely brilliant that day. And he's been coming through the ranks for quite a while and definitely has a lot of Donegal fans excited to see him. He's got a wand of a left boot as well from what I remember. So very, very top class player there, coming through the ranks for Donegal. And certainly with the likes of Michael Murphy getting older, Paddy McBurty getting older, they will need to freshen up that forward line from time to time. And a man like Oisín Gallen could definitely be that guy for Donegal. Moving on to Down. I mean, this is a tough one in some respects, because we don't really know if Sheelan Johnston is gonna commit to the Down senior footballers. He obviously played a huge part for Kilcue this year. He was fantastic for Down, the Down under 20s last year as well. He actually scored 1-5 in 4 games for Down, and he scored 1-3 for Kilcue in the Ulster Club Senior Football Championship. He didn't score in the semi-final or the final, but again, as I said, Down do have a good crop of younger players coming through there at the minute, and they've obviously brought through a lot of younger lads this year, and they've rotated their team quite a bit. And Anthony Morgan's another player there who looks quite good coming through the ranks for Kilcue at the minute. The question is, does he commit? Does he play for the senior footballers? Is he going to be with the under-20s for another year? I'm not exactly sure. The fact that he's obviously been playing for the under-20s in the last couple of years would suggest that he will be involved at some point. He hasn't been involved so far this year, so maybe they're just waiting until further on in the league or early in the championship. I'm not sure, but I would be surprised if they didn't bring him in, because he's definitely a player that I think Down are needing. They're obviously struggling in Division 2 at the minute, looking like they might go down to Division 3. So they're certainly needing a couple of players to come through the ranks there at the minute. And certainly a player like Sheelan Johnston, who, from what I remember of seeing of him with Kilcue, brilliant at holding up that possession, almost playing that sort of anchorman role, or that sort of, quarterback role in Gaelic football in many ways, the way he's supporting the play in front of him. A bit like Kieran Kilkenny-esque, kind of that sort of style where you're picking passes out in front of him, making driving runs. He's obviously not that last line of attack, so he's behind that full forward line there, but great at supporting that play. And as you said, he's been able to contribute a little bit along the way. 1-5 in 4 games for the under-20s last year, as we were eventually beaten in the semi-finals of the under-20 football championship, and 1-3 in Ulster for Kilcue as well. So very, very impressive stuff as well. Moving on to Dublin, and there was a comment coming in there from Sharon Hegarty who said Ross McGarry looked good against Mayo. He certainly did, and that is the player that I have gone for Dublin coming through the ranks at the minute. Look, obviously there's a whole host of young players that have been involved with Dublin so far this year, and it hasn't exactly gone according to plan, has it, for Dublin this year at all? I mean, we've seen Lee Gannon come into the team. I think he started every game from what I remember. Kieran Archer made a brief cameo against Kerry, but for whatever reason doesn't seem to be getting game time. We've seen Mark Lavin come in there as well. Lorcan O'Dell, scored 1-1 coming off the bench against Armagh. And obviously for a lot of those younger lads, I do think I think it's a difficult time that they've come into the Dublin team. Dublin are obviously dreadful at the minute, and we'll certainly speak about that in more detail in tomorrow's show. But it has been tough for some of those younger lads to come in, and the style that we're playing and the tactics and everything else, it just doesn't really suit a lot of those players that have come through. Like, from what I've seen of Lee Gannon, he's a very forward-thinking cornerback, runs forward, contributes with a couple of points, very sort of that same ilk of a Jack McCaffrey and whatnot. We just haven't played that style whatsoever this year at all, which, has very much hindered maybe some of those lads. But as I was saying, look, Ross McGarry has definitely been a player who's, been coming through the ranks for Dublin in the last couple of seasons. You think back to 2017 in that minor football championship, he scored 5-15 in 6 games for Dublin in that particular year. He's been, heavily a part of Ballyboat and St. Enda's actually as well. He played a key role for them when they came through the Dublin Senior Football Championship back in 2019, and were eventually beaten in the All-Ireland Club semi-finals by Kilcoo. But he was a big part of that team, played a big role in that team as well. And this has been the year where he has broke into that senior team, scoring 2 points against Mayo. And look, it isn't just his points as well. It has been that contribution as well. But as I said, it's been tough for him so far coming into the team, and tough for any forwards coming into that Dublin team. We're not playing well at the minute. But he does look like a player who could be an option. And, we were saying last year about Dublin where they didn't really have too many big options coming off the bench. He might just be an option. And if Dublin do get their act together at some point this year, I would suspect that he could be a big part of it. I really, really do, because he's looked very, very good so far for Dublin this year. Moving on to Fermanagh then, couple of options here really with Fermanagh. I mean, they have brought through, they've had quite a high turnover of players in the last couple of years in terms of young players coming through the ranks. I mean, Darragh McGurn looks pretty good. I interviewed him on my own podcast there about a year ago. But the player I have gone for is a player by the name of Conor Love. And Fermanagh fans will love this guy, no doubt about it, because he's been superb for Fermanagh in the last couple of years, especially for the under-20s. He scored 9 points for the under-20s last year in 2 games. I suppose the problem really with the under-20s, and we'll see this with some of the counties that we discuss, really is there's a lot of lack of game time for some of these players in the last couple of years. And I do really think they need to start restructuring the under-20 football championship and really start making it more of a group stage format. I know there was talks of them doing that. I don't know if they're actually going ahead and doing that this year, but, I think doing something for the under-20s and for the minor football championship where it's group stages, it's more of a development league. So teams get more game time. Like we'll run through some counties a little bit later, have played maybe 2-3 under-20 football games in the last 3 years. And you're kind of wondering, how are players supposed to progress in those circumstances. But look, Conor Love, he hasn't been involved with the senior football team so far this year, from what I know. Could be with the under-20s again this year. But look, as I said, 9 points for the under-20s last year in 2 games. He's been looking good, and definitely for Fermanagh, a little bit of positivity right there. And who knows, maybe if they do push for Division 3 and come up to Division 2, they might have a couple of players maybe being added to the team for next year who could make a big addition. For anyone who's watching live, feel free to let me know in the comments down below what player are you most excited for coming through your county at the minute. What young players are coming through for your own county at the minute, and feel free to let me know what players you think could make a big impact, maybe not this year, but maybe in the up and coming years, because there certainly is a lot of talent coming through Gaelic football at the minute. And another team that has a whole host of young players coming through, and really there was a whole host of players I could have chose from here, really, and that is Galway, because we've seen obviously them win that under-20 football championship in 2020 when they beat Dublin in the final. And some of the players who were involved that day, Matthew Tierney, Jack Lynn, Paul Kelly, Sean Kelly. We've seen Matthew Cooley come through the ranks as well. Peter Cook looked like a brilliant player for Galway last year, but from what I know, he's opted out this year. So Tom O'Callaghan is the player I've gone for in the end. And as I was saying before, maybe a little bit of an obvious choice in some respects, but I think he's done very well so far this year as well. Like in the Sigerson Cup this year for NUIG, he scored 111 in the 6 games that he played in, and really played a pivotal role for Galway in winning that first Sigerson Cup final since 2003. And I remember watching that final between NUIG and UL, and it was a very tough, conditions were awful that day. It looked like a very, very tough game to play in. Nighttime game, just not great conditions at all, but I thought he'd done very well as well, and he's very pacey, very quick on the ball, explosive, and I think when he bulks up a bit more as he gets older, I think you're going to see a real player coming through Galway at the minute. And I think there's exciting times for Galway at the minute. I really do. I think they've got some good younger players coming through there at the minute, and I think that we'll see what happens with them. There's mixed opinions on Galway. I think they've got a great attack, but a relatively poor defence. But for Tom O'Callaghan, he's looked very good. And as I said, he played a big role for Galway against the Dubs in that 2020 under-20 football championship final. He actually scored 1-6 that day, as Galway won the first under-20 football title since 2013. And he actually scored 1-2 in 3 games so far this year. He didn't feature against Cork. So, definitely a player coming through the ranks there at the minute is Tom O'Callaghan, and definitely a player worth watching out for from a Galway perspective. Moving on to Kerry then, and I mean, mother of God, I mean, there's a whole host of players you could really speak of here. I mean, David Clifford is only 23, and I think a lot of people forget that. I mean, he is by far and away the best wonder kid at Kerry, and obviously the best player that's came through at Kerry in the last couple of years. But I mean, thinking a little bit outside the box, I mean, you've obviously got Tony Brosnan in there as well, who looks very good. Dylan Casey, Paul Walsh actually looked very good at Sigerson Cup level, and obviously he was 2018 Minor Footballer of the Year. But one player that has caught the eye, and a couple of people have certainly mentioned him before, is Paul O'Shea. I think he's looked very good for the Kerry under-20s. Obviously, there's been a lack of game time, I suppose you could say, for the Kerry under-20s in the last couple of years. I mean, they only had that one game versus Cork. Last year, he scored 1-2 that day. And he obviously played a pivotal role back in 2018 when Kerry won that minor football championship as well. I suppose the problem really is for Paul O'Shea, and you could probably say the same for Paul Walsh and even some of the other players coming through there at the minute, is there is just so much talent at Kerry. We have experienced lads like Paul Gainey and Stephen O'Brien. Maybe when those lads retire, there might be spaces that might open up for some other players to come in there. But you just have so many attacking talent. Killian Spillane, who's in there obviously as well. Darren Moynihan, Micheál Burns. Just so many attacking talent all across the board from a Kerry point of view. But Paul O'Shea might just be a player who could break through maybe in the next couple of years. He might be with the under-20s again this year, but he could be a player definitely to watch out for. Speaking of Kildare and speaking of younger players coming through at the minute, I mean, Kildare is definitely a county on the rise at the minute, and they've definitely got a whole host of players coming through. I mean, Jimmy Hyland at the minute has probably been arguably, the best player in 2022 so far, the best forward. He's certainly in contention anyway. He's certainly up there with David Clifford. He's been absolutely fantastic. But you're seeing a lot of that 2018 under-20 Kildare All-Ireland winners coming through the ranks now at the minute. Aaron Masterson's another one who's looked good in and around the middle. Paddy Woodgate's obviously come into the team this year as well. But the player I have gone for maybe is a little bit, thinking outside the box. And as I said, we've seen a lot of Jimmy Hyland this year. We know his talent. We know how good he is. But Dara Kirwan is another player who could be next in line to really break through that Kildare team. And for Kildare fans, they'll know exactly who he is. I mean, he's been playing quite regularly. He's been making appearances off the bench. Brilliant for Naas in the Leinster Club Senior Football Championship. He actually scored 3-6 in 2 games for Naas before he picked up an injury just before that Leinster Club Senior Football Championship final versus Dublin. So look, I think Dara Kirwan's looked pretty good, making a couple of cameo appearances coming off the bench. He's of a different grade as well. He wasn't part of that 2018 minor team or a 2018 under-20 team. So, he could definitely be one that could make the breakthrough for Kildare and maybe become a regular starter, a little bit later on in the season or maybe next year. But look, Kildare's forwards are motoring very, very well at the minute. I don't think you change that full forward line of Paddy Woodgate, Daniel Flynn, Jimmy Hyland. I don't think you change that full forward. So I think to have an option like Dara Kirwan coming off the bench from a Kildare perspective, I think it looks very, very good indeed. 99 Aguero says Micheál Bannigan, Aaron Mulligan, and Gary Mohan for Monaghan. Certainly a lot of top-class players coming through the ranks at Monaghan at the minute, and certainly we will get onto that a little bit later. But moving on to Laois, and the next few counties were a little bit tricky, I'm not going to lie. Laois, Longford, Louth, Leitrim, tough to really know what young lads are obviously coming through the ranks there at the minute. And you're looking back at under-20 games from last year. You're looking at match reports to see maybe who could be up and coming there. And unless you're really supporters of those counties, you're probably not going to know realistically who is the players who are maybe making a breakthrough at club level. But Mark Barry is a player there who has looked pretty well for the Laois under-20s in the last couple of seasons. And he's actually made the breakthrough to the senior team this year as well, scoring 2-6 in 4 games, including 2-1 last weekend, actually, against Fermanagh. So, he's been a player who's been knocking on the door for Laois in the last couple of years. And obviously with, the Kingston brothers retiring and, a few other lads getting older there as well, Laois have obviously had quite a crop of, change in the last couple of years, different managers, new players coming in. But Mark Barry looks like a player who could make an impact for this Laois team in, the next couple of seasons. Obviously, with some of these counties, you don't really know what you're going to get. Sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get sometimes, because we see sometimes, some of these counties are knocked out of the championship quite early on. Some of the, teams don't feature late on in qualifiers. So you don't really know what you're going to get. But Mark Barry definitely looks like a good player coming through the ranks there at the minute for Laois. And he was also part of the team as well that reached the 2019 under-20 Leinster final. And he played quite well that day when they played Dublin. So, Mark Barry's looked decent for Laois so far this year. Moving on to Leitrim then. I mean, another tough one as well in many respects. I mean, you've got Mark Diffley, who has come through the ranks there a little bit and looked quite impressive. But the player I've gone for is Tom Pryor. Andy Moran's obviously, made a couple of changes to the Leitrim team this year. He's obviously looked at Ballinamore, Sean O'Heslands, and he's obviously looking at maybe some younger lads that have come through. And I think the problem is with your Leitrims, your Longfords, your Louths is, you usually only get maybe 1 to 2 games at under-20 level a year. Makes it very difficult for them to, spot younger players that are coming through. But Tom Pryor's looked good so far this year. He's come into the senior team 2-3 in 4 games, and he only started 1 game as well, which was actually the most recent game against Waterford, scoring 1-1. So look, there are a couple of players coming through there for Leitrim at the minute. Mark Diffley, obviously, as well, as I said. Interesting enough, he scored, I think, 2-4, I think it was, from fullback a couple of years ago at under-20 level, which is, kind of crazy, really. You don't hear of that too much. So definitely some big talent coming through the ranks at the minute. And Jack Nulty right on time for Longford there. He says Keelan McGann, Joseph Hagan, Jack Duggan, maybe Jason Matthews as well. And Jack Duggan was the player I went for in the end. I mean, he's made a couple of starts already this year. For Longford, he's come into the team, a couple of times this year already and looked quite impressive, must be said, from a Longford point of view. Obviously, it's been tough for Longford this year. I mean, they got that huge win at the weekend against Westmeath, which is obviously a huge win for them. But, and look, for Longford, they're going to have to rotate. They're going to have to bring through new lads coming into the team. Obviously, with the likes of Rian Brady not in there. And just looking at Jack Duggan at under 20 level in the last couple of years, he scored 2-7 in 2 Leinster under 20 games for Longford last year. And he actually scored 1-6 against Westmeath as well. So it looks like you have a talent there coming through. I mean, again, what level is that talent at, maybe compared to a lot of other players coming through the ranks here at the minute. And he did start versus Westmeath last weekend, and from what I heard was quite impressive. So, from a Longford point of view, it's good to see some younger lads making the breakthrough at the minute, and it will be interesting to see what happens there. I believe I had, I think I had Owen Darcy on the screen there by accident, but it was Jack Duggan we were obviously speaking about right there. A few comments coming in there. William Reynolds says, "Are you looking at Westmeath?" Yeah, we'll be discussing Westmeath a little bit later on as well. And 99 Aguero says, "What's your thoughts on James McCarthy coming out of retirement to play for Dublin in the fight for survival?" Well, I don't think he ever retired, to be fair. He just hasn't been involved for whatever reason so far this year. But look, that's what you need. You need the big players to come back in. Apparently, he's going to get the captaincy as well, which I think is long overdue. I think he should have got the captaincy last year, in my opinion. I think he was next in line really to Stephen Cluxton in terms of becoming the captain. But look, great to have him back in there. Hopefully he is back in there, because he was named in the starting 15 against Kerry and then never was. So we'll see what happens there. Corin says, "What about Down?" Yeah, we discussed Down earlier, mate. We're going in alphabetical order. Sheelan Johnston was the man I mentioned there. Obviously done very well with Kilcoo this year. Been very impressive with the under-20s in the last couple of years. I suppose the big question is, does he commit to the senior footballers? Obviously, given the success of Kilcoo, that's kind of been the thing there, isn't it? The last couple of years, a lot of Kilcoo lads haven't really committed, but he has obviously been very involved with the under-20s the last couple of years. So I do think he will be involved, no doubt about that. But anyway, moving on to Louth. Kieran Keenan is the man I went for here. I mean, Louth was another difficult one as well. You're kind of looking at it and thinking, who is actually making the breakthrough there. But Kieran Keenan looks impressive. He scored 2 points against Offaly last year and was very impressive throughout the majority of that game, and arguably Louth's best player on the pitch. Hasn't really featured too much this year, which has maybe been a little bit of a surprise from a Louth perspective. So he's looked quite impressive from a Louth point of view. Another player worth mentioning as well is Carl Gillespie, 12 points in his last 3 under-20 games. But the problem with that is it actually spans back to 2019. One under-20 game per year right there, but 12 points combined in those 3 games. So look, what Mickey Hart in at the fold in Louth, there might be a couple of players maybe making that breakthrough in the next couple of seasons. And maybe if you push up to Division 2 as well, looking at Nave Martins as well and some of their success, there could be a couple of players maybe that might make that breakthrough. Moving on to Mayo, and I mean, in a similar fashion to Kerry, maybe. I mean, Mayo might be probably the best team at the minute in terms of younger players. I mean, you could really pick anyone out of that starting 15. You really could. I mean, you've got Aidan Norman and Jack Harney, who obviously, made the breakthrough into the team this year. Oisin Mullen, outstanding over the last couple of seasons. Ryan O'Donoghue, Tommy Conroy, Fionn McDonough, Jordan Flynn. I mean, there's so many players, and the Hessian, so many players who've made the breakthrough for Mayo in the last couple of years. It's almost not fair. But rather than picking any of those players, I've gone for someone different. And I think this is a player that a lot of people are going to hear about in the next couple of years. And Shea O'Donoghue was one player I was looking at, who is Ryan O'Donoghue's brother. But maybe Mayo fans will be familiar with this guy, and that is Conal Dempsey. And I've seen him play quite a bit for Knockmore. I watched a lot of Knockmore's games this year. in the Mayo Club Senior Football Championship, and I thought he was very impressive. And he was also in that UL team that made the Sigerson Cup final as well. So he's a player that's definitely making a bit of headlines coming through the ranks there at the minute. Can play in midfield, can play in the half forward line, very pacey, very quick on the ball. And certainly when he gets that physicality and bulks up a bit more when he gets older, I think you're definitely going to hear a lot of him as well. And obviously Mayo aren't exactly crying out for a midfielder at the minute. I think their midfield is pretty solid at the minute in terms of Conor Loftus and Matthew Ruan, and obviously you have Jeremy O'Connor who can slot in there as well. But this guy could definitely make an impact for Mayo. He scored 1-4 for the under-20s last year as well. So look, there's no immediate rush, I don't think, for James Horn. I think this is probably the best Mayo squad we've seen since 2017. And you haven't had many retirements this year. You've obviously had a couple of injuries. Tommy Conroy's injured. We don't know what's going to happen with Cillian O'Connor. Maybe there might be an addition for a couple of players to come in there, no doubt about it. Moving on to Meath then. Meath's another one where they have a lot of young players already in the team. Matthew Costello, Jordan Morris, Cathal Hickey have obviously all made the breakthrough in the last couple of years. Their under-20s have struggled. Luke Mitchell has done quite well there for the under-20s. He's been a player that I've been impressed with. But obviously you have that under-20 team, or you have that minor team who, of course, won the minor football championship last year. Meath's first minor senior or minor football championship since 1992. So look, I think Sean Emanuel's done very, very well for Meath. I remember watching that game against Dublin. Meath and Dublin in the minor football championship, and I thought he was he was outstanding, very explosive, very quick, very strong, very hard player to knock off the ball. A huge amount of turnovers I remember in the game as well. Like physically, he looks like he could already play senior football if he wanted to. And we were speaking about the likes of Lakeland Murray and Matthew Downey making that step up from the Derry minors straight up to the seniors. You wonder, could you see players like Sean Emanuel and Hughie Corcoran and these kind of lads, make that step up into the senior footballers? Meath are obviously struggling at the minute, and certainly in tomorrow's preview show, we'll discuss them in a little bit more detail, because they play Cork in what is really a do or die clash in terms of who will avoid relegation, who will stay up in Division 2. But it's been a tough one for Meath so far this year. But maybe with players like that coming in, it is obviously a bit early, and it's very rare for players to make that direct step up from minor straight up into senior football. But Meath look like they maybe need a few new lads coming into that team. I know they have a couple of players injured, but maybe someone like Sean Emanuel might just give them a bit of a boost. Fresh face in the squad, but we'll see what happens. It's probably very unlikely, in all honesty. Moving on to Monaghan then as well, and obviously 99 Guerrero, who commented earlier, talking about the likes of Andrew Woods and Micheál Bannigan, but I don't think you can look past Aaron Mulligan. I think he's been brilliant for Monaghan since he's come in the team in the last 2 seasons. I mean, we all know for Monaghan, you obviously have Conor McManus, who's been probably one of the best forwards we've arguably ever seen in Gaelic football, and probably the best footballer to ever play for Monaghan, give or take. Maybe there's a few other players who might get mentioned there, but Aaron Mulligan's coming through and looked very, very good, and he's just been that extra forward that I think Monaghan have needed, because their team hasn't really changed too much over the last 6-7 years. You've still got the same old faces in there. Jack McCarron, Kieran Hughes, Darren Hughes, these kind of lads, and having the likes of Andrew Woods coming in there, having the likes of Aaron Mulligan come in as well, who was very impressive last year, I felt, for Monaghan. But yeah, he hasn't really featured too much this year, which is a little bit surprising from a Monaghan point of view. But I would suspect the longer the championship goes on, or the more the championship goes on, the league goes on, and the championship, you would suspect that a player like Aaron Mulligan will certainly start starting a lot more, having more of an impact in games. And I remember in the Armagh game as well, very impressive, brilliant forward, quick, pacey, brilliant at scores as well on both feet. So yeah, Aaron Mulligan, definitely a player worth watching out for. Moving on to Offaly then. And it's kind of funny, maybe a couple of years ago, this might have been a county you would have struggled with. Maybe you wouldn't have known too many players coming through the ranks at Offaly at the minute. But really, there's a whole host of options. Under 20 football champions last year, which was obviously a huge achievement for Offaly, their first under 20 football championship in 33 years. And that really does tell you just how many talent is coming through there. Jack Bryant is obviously, he was top scorer in the under 20 football championship last year. He's looked absolutely exceptional. But not only that as well, like you have Keane Farrell, who broke into the senior team last year, looked very good. You've got Keane Johnson coming through. You've obviously got Anton Sullivan, who scored 1-3 coming off the bench at the weekend. So he's looked very, very good as well. But the man I've gone for is the man on the thumbnail, and that is Cormac Egan. Scored 1-6 for Offaly, for the Offaly under-20s on their journey to winning the under-20 football championship. And we were mentioning earlier about Sean Emanuel coming through the ranks at Meath at the minute and how he already looks like a player who is built for senior football. And I think Cormac Egan is a player like that as well. I mean, he's made a couple of appearances already this year coming off the bench for the Offaly seniors. And maybe he might be involved with the Offaly under-20s later in the year as well. But look, this guy is definitely a player worth watching out for. Offaly might go down to Division 3 this year. They might be relegated. But you're looking at those younger lads and they might maybe have an impact in Tailteann Cup or, Division 3 next year. Obviously the Leinster, a lot of teams are on the slide in Leinster at the minute. So, maybe Offaly could potentially take advantage of that. And I've liked the look of Cormac Egan, just very, very hard player to dispossess, brilliant tackler of the ball as well, a high amount of turnovers in that Roscommon win. I remember against Dublin as well in that Leinster final, he was exceptional. He was always on the ball, picking out passes in front of him, kicking a couple of scores as well. And Dublin just couldn't get the ball off him at times. He was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I think Cormac Egan is definitely the man to watch out for there. For Roscommon, I mean, you have funnily enough, that's who Offaly beat in the under-20 football championship last year. And I mean, Roscommon do have a good couple of players coming through there. Obviously, having gotten to that final. I mean, Adam McDermott looked very good last year. Dara Craig coming through, who I believe is the brother of Cathal Craig. So he might be one definitely to watch out for as well. But I've gone for a defender, and probably one of the only defenders really on this list, and that is Colin Walsh. Has made a couple of appearances coming off the bench this year, but hasn't really featured too much for Anthony Cunningham's men so far this year. But look, for Roscommon, I mean, their problem through the years is they've had the talent going forward. They've always had brilliant forwards and Connor Cox and Enda Smith and, a whole host of players that have obviously broke through in the last couple of years or last 10 years or so. Has been defense that has been the problem, when they've been playing on the front foot, when they've been playing attacking, they've been too leaky defensively. And even when they switched to a very defensive system last year, it still didn't really fix anything. They still struggled quite a bit. So, maybe having someone like Colin Walsh coming in there, a fullback, he might make a bit of a difference to that Roscommon team. And, that defense maybe is aging a little bit. There is a couple of players getting older there. So there might be a time to refresh the team and maybe make a bit of an impact there as well. So definitely Colin Walsh, definitely one worth watching out for. I mean, there's so many counties to get through here. It's crazy. But right next to Roscommon is Sligo, and we have Luke Towie, who has made an impact right there for Sligo. I mean, you have Pat Spillane Jr., who's obviously been called into the team this year. He's obviously not a Sligo native. He's a Kerry native. But, I mean, he was definitely a player I could have went for. And Sligo do have a lot of young lads coming through. I mean, Noah Murphy's looked very impressive so far this year. But Luke Towie's definitely a player for Sligo I think you're going to hear more of, because he only came back from AFL in late 2021, so he's gone straight back into the senior team. 1-4 in a goal and 4 points in 3 appearances so far this year for Sligo. And he was also shooting the lights out at times for DCU in the Sigerson Cup this year as well. So, for Sligo, realistically, what are they looking to achieve? Obviously, in Division 4, I'm sure they're going to be up there battling for promotion. They have a big game against Leitrim, I think, this weekend, which will obviously be significant for them in their promotion battle. And, Luke Towie hasn't played every game so far this year for Sligo, but he's played in 3 games. So he's looked very impressive. And, obviously with Red Oak Murphy, who certainly would have been on this list had he not opted out. It's good to have, a player coming in with maybe not the same amount of quality, but certainly a player that's done very, very well for Sligo so far this year. And continuing on in alphabetical order, we move on to Tipperary. And for me, there was really only one option here, in my opinion, and that was Sean O'Connor. And as I was saying earlier with a couple of teams, when you have players opting out and players retiring, it makes it very tough to obviously continue at the same levels you were going at. And we've seen Tipperary struggle quite a bit with some of the players who have opted out and retired in recent seasons. But Sean O'Connor's come in, and he's come in, any big Tipperary football fans will tell you he's definitely a man with a big reputation there, because he actually scored 215 in 3 games for the Tip under-20s last year, and actually finishes the top scorer in the Munster football, in the under-20 Munster football championship. So that tells you a lot about how good he was. And he scored 1-1 in 4 games this year, scored a decisive goal against Sligo, as well as Tipperary, I suppose, getting back on that promotion charge. And I suppose if Tipperary are going to do anything miraculous this year, like they've done in previous years, maybe Sean O'Connor might be the guy to watch out for there. But we'll say that's certainly one worth keeping an eye on. Moving on to Tyrone. And there are some obvious ones here with Tyrone. Obviously, Derek Hannivan's been absolutely brilliant for Tyrone when he's come off the bench. Very explosive on the ball. And, when he starts finding that and starts adding that end product to his game, I think he's going to be a phenomenal footballer, I really do. But you've got Paul Donaghy in there, Rory Canavan as well. Ronan Cassidy's look good as well at minor level. But the player I've gone for is Cormac Devlin. And we've seen Tyrone obviously reach the minor football final last year. What's interesting is Tyrone are still bringing through, they're one of the best teams, in my opinion, at just continuously bringing through young players year on year. Maybe they haven't added too many into the senior team this year, but generally speaking, they're always doing quite well at under 20 level, minor level. They're just very consistent at that level. And maybe they might have the odd year, like last year when they lost to Donegal, for example, at under 20 level, where they might struggle. But generally speaking, they're always very, very good at that level. And Cormac Devlin with 219 in 5 games for the Tyrone Miners in the 2021 Minor Football Championship. So, look, he's definitely a guy worth keeping an eye on for Tyrone in the next couple of years. There certainly is no rush to bring him through to the senior team. I think we'll definitely see him staying with the Miners maybe this year, and then maybe going into the under-20s in the next couple of years. So I like the look of Cormac Devlin. I remember watching him in that game versus Meath last year. Very impressive stuff. Took his points very, very well. He's added he obviously got 2 goals along the way as well. So definitely a player that you could see more of in Tyrone colours. Not every player who starts at minor level makes that breakthrough into the senior team eventually further down the line. But I think this is definitely a guy you could very well hear of. Moving on to Waterford. A difficult one in many ways, because as we very well know, Waterford are predominantly hurling county. But I have gone for Dara Corcoran. He was a player I had on the podcast, one of the very first people I ever had on the podcast, quite nearly 2 years ago at this stage, which is quite crazy. But he's done very well this year, to be fair to him. 1-11 in 4 games so far in 2022, including 1-5 against Leitrim. I think I remember he scored 1-7 against Clare for the under-20s there a couple of years ago as well. So, in terms of Waterford football, they're not known for bringing through top-class forwards or, brilliant players, and they've never really been that good at football, and they've never really done anything hugely significant. But he's definitely a player who's done well this year, and, you're looking at Division 4, and it's obviously very unlikely that Waterford get out of Division 4 at this point. You know, they haven't got out of Division 4 in, you know, quite a long time at this stage. But in terms of Tailteann Cup or whatever, he might be a player to watch out for, and he might maybe be that sort of, you know, main forward or marquee forward in that Waterford team. So we'll obviously see what happens there. Comments coming in there. The reason Aaron Mulligan isn't playing, he's lining out for Meath the night before inter-county game, so that's fair enough there. Paul Joyce says, great show. Cheers very much, Paul. Hope all is well. Hope you're keeping well, my man. Over in Canada, I'd much rather be over there than Ireland at the minute anyways. But yeah, moving on anyway. You have Westmeath. And Ronan O'Toole, I think, has been very impressive so far from a Westmeath point of view. I think he's done very, very well in the last couple of seasons. You know, like very quick on the ball, very pacey, very explosive. You know, and obviously with Westmeath, they've had a struggling year this year. You know, they're down near the bottom of Division 3, and it hasn't really gone according to plan so far from a Westmeath point of view. But I've liked the look of Ronan O'Toole for Westmeath in the last couple of seasons. Very pacey. Probably just needs to add that end product. Watched a good bit of Westmeath last year, remember, against Cork, and very hard player to dispossess. I mean, he's, you know, small in terms of height, but that obviously makes it very hard for players to get the ball off him because he's so quick with the ball. Looks like a very, very good player, and if he can add that end product to his game, I think we'd be looking at a serious footballer in the next couple of seasons. You've got Wexford then. This was another difficult one. It really, really was, because, you know, Wexford they haven't really done well at all in the last couple of years at senior level. Don't really have much young players coming through there at all, and obviously, you know, the hurling's obviously massively taken over there in recent seasons. But the one player I have gone for is a player by the name of Shane Pettit. Obviously don't know a huge deal about him, to be perfectly honest, but he scored 1-5 last year in the under-20 Leinster Football Championship. And what's actually interesting is Offaly only beat Wexford by a point, and Offaly went on to win the All-Ireland. So, you know, it does go to show you sometimes how close a lot of these games can be at under-20 level as well, you know. And I suppose from a Wexford point of view, they'll definitely take a lot of confidence in that. But yeah, Shane Pettit there with 1-5 in that game. So look, if there's a player maybe that's going to make a breakthrough in the next couple of seasons from a Wexford point of view, he could definitely be the man right there. Moving on to Wicklow, and we've got Owen Darcy. I think I had this image up on the screen earlier by accident, but yeah, I think Owen Darcy looks like a very good player for Wicklow. I really, really do. I think this could be a player a lot of people hear of in the next couple of years. I was actually at that game in Parnell Park last year, Dublin and Wicklow in the under-20 football championship, and I thought it was unbelievable that day. He really, really was. And you know, he scored. You know, when you look back to last year, what he done at under-20 level, 2-1 against the Laois under-20s. Wicklow were very close to beating Dublin as well in that game. Like, it really wasn't far off. You know, there was only 3 or 4 points going down the home stretch. I think Wicklow missed a penalty as well, hit the bar a couple of times. So looks like a top quality player. 1-1 so far in 4 games this year for the Wicklow senior footballers, which certainly tells you how good he has been for Wicklow in 2022. And obviously Wicklow have changed their management this year. They've brought in the management pair who are obviously overseeing the under-20s, so that could give someone like Owen Darcy a huge boost as well. So, you know, Wicklow have got a couple of players coming through the ranks there that some people probably haven't heard of, but I think they will hear of in the next couple of years, no doubt about that. And obviously with Shawnee Furlong retiring, it does give an opportunity for some younger players to make that breakthrough. I just realized we forgot about Limerick. Poor old Limerick. Completely forgot about them. And they do have a lot of players coming through as well. In terms of, you know, they have their own academy down there at the minute. That I believe Paul Conurk is ahead of there at the minute. So I think Limerick are looking good, and you might see a couple of players breaking through there at the minute. Ian Corbett's obviously looked very, very well But I think Hugh Burke has definitely been a huge player there for Limerick in the last couple of seasons, and he's been a big addition coming into that Limerick team, no doubt about it. He's been very, very impressive, and I think you could definitely see him, making that extra step up in that Limerick team, and you could see Limerick cause a couple of shocks this year maybe as well. They're on that side of the draw where they don't play Kerry or Cork in the Munster Football Championship, so there definitely could be an opportunity there for Limerick to cause a shock, and a player like Hugh Burke has definitely looked very, very impressive. Irish Footy Vlog says Cathal Hickey of Meath. Yeah, he obviously came into the team last year. Yeah, he's looked very good, hasn't he? He's looked very, very good, brilliant, and I think he plays a cornerback from what I remember, or that wing-back kind of type role. And yeah, look, I mean, Meath have plenty of good young players in there. It's just about making it work, making it click. And obviously, when you get a couple of players coming back from injury, I think we will see Meath improve. But yeah, I think Cathal Hickey, very impressive, no doubt about it. Was good against the Dubs last year, from what I remember. So definitely a lot of talent coming through Meath at the minute. Just a brief mention for some players coming through London and New York. Obviously, these teams not competing at under 20 level at the minute, so very, very hard to actually know what players are coming through the ranks. Not many information available to us. But James Gallagher's looked good for London this year. Don't know if he's exactly a wonder kid as such, but he's looked good so far for London. He obviously got that decisive goal in I think it was when they beat Leitrim, I think it was, from what I remember. So he's looked pretty good. And for New York, Tiernan Mathers is a player that I've heard of St. Barnabas, I think it is. There's a few people that have mentioned him before, so he could definitely be a guy worth keeping an eye on right there. Irish Footy Vlog says, with me, there are a few issues in the camp, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, and that's a discussion for another day, my man. It definitely is, and maybe might discuss that a bit more tomorrow in the preview show. But yeah, things not looking too good for Meath, and you're looking at that Cork game, and it's do or die in many ways, with the fact that you obviously have Down and Offaly playing each other as well. So, one of them two are probably going to pick up points, and that will make it that bit more difficult from a Meath perspective. So, yeah, look, listen, we'll wrap this up here. If you could leave a like and subscribe, would very much appreciate it. And yeah, the preview show will be out tomorrow, previewing all the games, discussing all the games for this weekend. And I mean, there's a whole host of games, obviously, this weekend, 16 games in total. So, it will certainly be a long show indeed. So, yeah, cheers anyone who tuned in, and I'll see you all later.